Hi everyone. We want to welcome you guys to the first club event for the International Relations Club. My name is Francisco. I'm the Director of PR and External Affairs for the International Relations Club here at Harvard. Our club is dedicated to raising awareness of current issues in international relations and world diplomacy. Our goal is to promote dialogues among students and scholars as well as policymakers through a unique blend of educational and social events that inspire engagement in the world affairs. I want to introduce Tenzin Dini, who is the Vice President of the International Relations Club.
Our first performance is Deshishoba. Our next speaker was born as a refugee in the foothills of Himalayas in India. Fighting for his country's independence, he believed that from a very young age, he was mentally and emotionally trained to stand up to speak against social and economic injustices. He is the first Tibetan in the world to be elected as a labor leader and is currently the Executive Vice President of Service Employees International Union Healthcare Minnesota. He has wealth of experience working on election campaigns in the US. He has worked on late Senator Paul Wellstone's campaign, and in the Tibetan community he has served as the General Secretary and President of Regional Tibetan Youth Congress. For those of you who are not aware of Tibetan Youth Congress, it is the largest non-profit organization fighting for Tibet's independence. Since the recent spate of self-immolations inside Tibet, he has been touring different schools, speaking about the self-immolation cases inside Tibet. And he was at 5 different schools this entire week, and today he just flew in from Minnesota to our event. The list of all of the accomplishments he's made toward Tibetan community is just greatly too numerous to mention in his brief introduction. So it is a tremendous honor to invite Mr. Jigme Ugen. Thank you.
Hello. Good evening again. Dila said, I was born a refugee. A lot of us in this room were born refugees. One of the intents, one of the goals is not to die as one. The recent events in Tibet has led lots of Tibetans in exile really question about what's happening. The representative talked about the history of Tibet. We are now at a crossroad. We're trying to really understand the message coming in from Tibet. We're trying to understand the sacrifices made in Tibet. Today, we'll talk a little bit about the self-immolations. But more important than the self-immolations, I think, is to talk about the environment, the circumstances. I'd like to thank the Harvard Extension International Relations Club for organizing this event. Thank you very much. As Tibetans, we've taken the responsibility to spread the word, the message coming in from Tibet. Any kind of platform, any forum, any ears to listen, we are there. 52 years in exile. representative talked about how and why we came into exile. But these 52 years has been a hallmark in terms of refugees around the world. A celebration, an understanding of what a community of about 140,000 people spread across the world can do when they are focused on a single goal. A Nobel Peace Prize, a Congressional Gold Medal, and a school in exile. The upholding and the keeping of the culture, the identity, all from a group of people who don't have a country, a government that cannot write policies, cannot negotiate terms with other governments, being recognized. We have a newly elected Prime Minister from your prestigious institution, Dr. Lobsa Sangye. We have a religious leader, and then 6 million people in Tibet. That's the story, 52 years. To understand the evolutions that happened in Tibet, the uprisings that we briefly touched in 1959, 300,000 Tibetans lined up in the streets of Lhasa, believing, united to protect Tibet, to protect the symbol of Tibet, the Dalai Lama. Fast forward, started in March of 1987. Tibetans were being prosecuted. The policies placed in Tibet were getting harsher. The Chinese government introduced a patriotic re-education. What led to it was Tibetans in Lhasa and other parts of Tibet. Minimum in other parts of Tibet, but more in Lhasa, an uprising that had not been witnessed in the world since 1959. But our focus today is 2008, March of 2008. The biggest uprising someone like me, my generation, had seen of Tibet. A generation of people in Tibet who witnessed the biggest uprising all across Tibet. This was a few months before the Olympics happened. And this even marked the 50th anniversary of the 1959 uprising. Tibetans in Tibet believed that the world was watching China. The Olympics was coming in place. It was uprising. Within days, thousands of Tibetans were killed. They marched out in the street. They were holding pictures of the Dalai Lama, which in the past, just a simple act of having a small or any photo of the Dalai Lama or the Tibetan national flag would lead you into prison, would lead you into hard torture. 2008, all across Tibet, hand-painted flags, portraits of the Dalai Lama out in the street. Strenuous. It sent a strong signal to Beijing. A system that was pushed on fear and intimidation. It no longer held water in Tibet. And along the way, while there were other grassroots movements that happened in Tibet, I kind of bring focus to the 2006. This happened, us Tibetans back in Tibet, it's a very cold country, People love animal skins, give them a sense of pride, authority. And in 2006, actually, His Holiness, in one of his teachings at a college chapter, actually said that these animal skins should not be used. We should not do this. And a day or two following that, thousands of Tibetans, thousands, all across Tibet, came out in the street and burned the animal skin. Shook Beijing. One individual in exile says something and 6 million people are listening. 2010, town in Repcon, China had brought in a policy, hard enforcement by the local authorities on replacing Tibetan as a primary language with Chinese. 14, 15, 16-year-old kids walked out of the school, marched on the streets in Tibet, in Repcon, demanding the protection of the language. There was all across the world, people were appalled. But what happened inside Tibet was a ripple effect. There was support happening all across Tibet. In fact, even in Beijing, there were instances of students in Beijing supporting their students. The government backed out. It was a small victory. This year, the 60th anniversary of the People's Republic of China, portraits of the Dalai Lama and the Tibetan flag was flung out. There was an enthronement of the Dalai Lama. They created a lifelike image. Hundreds of monks, hundreds of monasteries participated. They had about 5,000 monks who came out, and they actually asked the Chinese army and the police not to interfere. They said, if you want to participate, you wear Tibetan clothes and come in. The enthronement went as planned. Victory. Tibetans in Tibet have started a grassroots movement. Tibetans in Tibet have realized there is a fight, a need to protect the identity. Younger people, born under the Chinese system, born during the Chinese regime, they didn't have 1959 to grab onto. They heard stories from their parents, their grandparents. What they saw was what happened in 2008. In fact, a certain population in China actually saw that Tibet actually had a flag. 2008 happened. Thousands of Tibetans killed. The reaction from Beijing was more military being sent in, more policies being imposed, directly affecting the 2009 self-evolution. It didn't stop there. The policies that came in, to a degree, were implemented pretty rushed, and we felt it has always been top-down. Any changes that Beijing wants to make, very microcosmic. But then to really deal with the Tibetans within Tibet, there were hard-line policies created. Patriotic re-education. It's now called legal education. Patriotic re-education is when a lot of monks and nuns in different monasteries who are more radical, much more outspoken, they are taken to a detention center. They're taken there and they are asked to A, denounce the Dalai Lama, B, recognize that Tibet is a part of China. It's interesting because one of the things that when we look into this is the world's youngest political prisoner, the world's longest serving political prisoner, the most amount of political prisoners are Tibetans. We have political prisoners who've been in prison for over 30 years. All they had to do was denounce the Dalai Lama and say that Tibet was a part of China, and they would have been released. 30 years. So this is the Kirti monastery actually. There are about 2,500 monks in there. In fact, when I met one of the monks who was in the Kirti monastery a long time ago, I told him, he has a Facebook page. So I tell him, I hope you will post it up there and start tagging people. But 2,500 monks in a monastery, today as we stand here, they are close to about 300 to 400 monks. Half of them chose not to stay in the monastery because of the patriotic re-education. People who didn't comply were taken away. These are the handbooks that you're forced to read. Every week, the monastery actually has classes. I hear it's 5 times a week. For a Tibetan Buddhist, your teacher holds umpteen reverence. When you denounce the Dalai Lama, there's no point on being a nun or a monk. A lot of them chose to just leave the monastery and go away. In fact, Beijing just recently said that 300 monks from the Kirti monastery are going through the legal education system. Based on all of this, the repression that happened, a point where the monks wanted to talk about this, we can tell you stories, we can share stories of political prisoners who didn't speak a word for 6 years because they felt nobody was listening to them and stayed in prison without talking to anyone. And when they were released, they could hardly talk. These were the points where Tibetans felt they were not being heard. The changes that they wanted to make, the things that they demanded for, simple things, some of them were very simple things. Whether it be recognizing the monasteries, recognizing the essence of what the religion is. When monks are not allowed to leave a monastery, nor the people are allowed to come in and visit them, monasteries weren't monasteries. Monks were monitored every day. There were more military and police inside these monasteries than the monks. So securitization of every aspect of life was coming in place. When we talk about self-evolution, these are 2 pictures I always share. One from Vietnam and one from Tunisia. Each sparked flames across the world. Each had their own cause, own reason. Protection of religion in Vietnam, frustration of the government and corruption in Tunisia. In Vietnam, it led to toppling of a regime. From Tunisia started the Arab Spring. These were desperations. These were calls of being helpless. Vietnam, it's pretty interesting because the more I try to study about it, the more interesting things I find out. How one had to meditate, come to terms, and believe that you are doing this and get support from your fellow monks. Tunisia abrupt and created an inspired movement across Africa. 1998, Tudemuru was on a hunger strike until death. The Indian police came in and force-fed him. He went inside the bathroom, doused himself with gasoline, and came out calling for Tibet's independence. The first self-evolution within the Tibetan movement. In 1959, even when the Chinese came in and occupied Tibet, the uprising, they want self-evolutions. When the Cultural Revolution came in, we didn't hear of self-evolutions. 1998 sent a shockwave across the community. The first self-evolution witnessed within the movement. 13 self-evolutions in Tibet so far. In fact, when I was making this presentation just yesterday, a 46-year-old man self-immolated. Tenzin Pinso was a father of 3 children. He used to be a monk, self-immolated. Tabe, one down there, he was in his mid-20s. When he self-immolated, he was running down the street. This happened in 2009. The police chased after him and shot him. And then, 2 days later, sent his family to prison for participating, encouraging, and helping him. So they were sent for 10 years each. This didn't sit well with the monks. It was hard punishment. Rather than listening and trying to understand why Tabe self-immolated, his family and the whole town was punished. 2011, that's when the spree started. And in Tibet they are saying they will not stop. They will not stop till the world reacts. Images are coming from Tibet. When we look at this, when we look at self-evolution, and when we look at what happened in Vietnam and what happened in Tunisia, these self-evolutions would, because it was for a nation, it was for the people, it was to highlight around the world and really tell the world that things are not still right in Tibet. When we go back and look at the ages, all of them were born under the Chinese system. This is a recent map, and those spots are the places where the evolution happened. The representative talked about the importance of Chamdo. Yesterday, the self-evolution actually happened in Chamdo. The yellow bordered line is the map of Tibet. So, what I did was, I went through a lot of news clips, I started putting in words together, and these were some of the things that were highlighted a lot. A lot of time it was termed as suicide, as extreme religion, fanatism. It was called that self-evolution is so anti-Buddhism, all of this. These monks and nuns who self-immolated made a very conscious decision not to hurt anyone. They made it very clear that they do not want to hurt, harm any of the Chinese people living around that neighborhood. They wanted to send a message to Beijing. They felt maybe these actions will shift, melt the policies placed in Tibet. Things are not changing. More military troops were sent into Ngaba. There's absolutely no media allowed in Tibet. We are getting footage of police and military walking around Ngaba with automatic weapons and a fire extinguisher in their hand. What has changed here since 2008 is fear and intimidation is not working. Tibetans in Tibet have said that the clear message coming in is they are not scared of dying. They are not scared of being killed. This is what concerns Beijing right now. So, like any other microcosmic change, Beijing started providing some of the monks with money. In fact, we heard reports that Beijing was actually offering a little pension for the monks. For us Tibetans, it's kind of surprising because once you're a monk, you never retire. So, completely unaware, no understanding or respect of what's happening in Tibet. And the constant blame game of blaming the Dalai Lama, of creating unrest in Tibet, yet at the same time contradicting and saying everything is okay in Tibet. These are the reasons, these draconian policies that have been placed, and the constant attack on the Dalai Lama seems to it's a contempt for the Tibetan way of life and disrespect. It's complete disrespect for the dignity that every Tibetan in Tibet or in exile have. So we look at these as, we have constantly said that nobody is encouraging evolutions, but it takes courage, it takes determination, it takes a lot of willpower, desperate acts of people who have no other way of telling the world or even trying to get Beijing to look at the issues and problems in Tibet. The consistent message, and I'd like to leave with that, coming from all the 13 self-immolation who have been religious freedom in Tibet, the return of the Dalai Lama in Tibet, and freedom in Tibet, for Tibet. These have been the consistent message right through. These aren't based out of organizations putting it together. These aren't based out of monasteries organizing any of these self-evolutions. These are individual actions, not hurting anyone, but making a conscious decision to burn themselves. From where I stand, this is a sacrifice for the nation. Sacrifice for our cause. It's a calling to the world, to people in this room, to people outside this room, to react and really try to understand why this is happening. There is actions happening globally. Signing a petition will help. We've seen it work. If these actions are not kept accounted for, China will keep doing it. We've seen citizens of the world make changes across. We believe in that. We know that the people who self-immolated in Tibet believe in that. That is the message we bring around. That is the conversation we want to have with you. We just are asking at this point to participate and stop something. It's going to spiral nationwide. It started from certain parts of Tibet, it's moving, and it's going to go around. There's been inspired self-immolations that happened in Nepal, attempts in Nepal, 2 attempts actually, 1 in India. This is going to grow. So, 2 petitions that have been highly urged. One of the petitions actually, the Enough petition, I remember I actually went with some staffers of students who are Free Tibet at the state, on November 2nd to the State Department. And we handed the petition to Maria Otero. 2 days later, we had a very strong testimony. A week later, we don't know if it's a direct effect, but Secretary Hillary Clinton in Hawaii made a strong statement. Governments listen when people speak. And this is what the self-immolations, the people in Tibet are demanding, are asking, are wanting people in this room to recognize. Thank you.
Thank you, Kunsal, for that stunning performance. I also forgot to mention that Kunsal has performed in the Carnegie Hall in New York and at various other really big events. So I'm afraid that we've run out of time, and we still have Tibetan circle dance, but before we commence the circle dance, I want to, our club president and our secretary is going to do the closing remark. But while they're walking here, I just want to take a minute to recognize someone in the audience. She is a living example of exactly what we're doing here today. Ngawa Sangdala is a former political prisoner. She's sitting back there. If I could ask her to stand, please. She was in prison at the age of 13 for participating in a protest in the capital of Tibet. She was in prison for 24 years, and it was because of international pressure that she was released from prison. And I want to thank her so much for coming here. And I'm going to turn the mic to our club president so that we could have the concluding remark. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. As Nathan said, my name is Jerry Bruno of the Harvard Extension International Relations Club. I am happy that we are able to fulfill a bit of our mission in bringing awareness to international affairs, but specifically in celebrating Tibet's rich history, as well as bringing awareness to Tibet's political struggles. We want to take a few moments to show appreciation to key individuals that made this program possible. Firstly, we have our first guest speaker who spoke of the history of Tibet. He traveled all the way from New York to share with us the history of Tibet. We want to thank you, Lomse Naitak. Secondly, our Tibetan expert on the political struggles of Tibet. He traveled all the way from Minnesota just to be here with us at Harvard this evening. Thank you, Joe.